have found the Genesis frequency. This is Dr. Stephen J. Kosmyna welcoming you in to another episode of a show that focuses on your whole life prosperity and success. Whole life prosperity and success by cooperating with the universal laws that are available to each and every one of us. This is Quantum Leap Goal Achievement, radical personal transformation, whole life prosperity and success. Now, stay tuned for another exciting episode that'll move the needle in your life from where you are now to where you want to be. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it may be, wherever you are in the world. When you hit that play button, so glad you did. Let's get to moving that needle, huh? This is Dr. Cause in Effect, Dr. Stephen J. Kosmyna coming at you with another episode of the Genesis Frequency Podcast. So glad to be here with you. So thankful for all of my listeners all over the world. Thank you so much for chiming in and day out and every week with a new episode coming out. And we're exploring. I see that so much has trended over the last few years to video, so we're taking a look at that. The platform I use has just adapted to being able to upload those kind of files, my distribution network. So we'll take a look at that. But hey, we're all about moving the needle in your life. Tremendous value here. I want to remind you, as I always do, to see, hear, feel the value that's in this podcast. So many people put little or no value on that which they get for free, and you are getting this for free. I don't even do commercials except for my own company, for the programs that I facilitate, that I teach, for speaking, for consulting, for working with small businesses, large businesses, corporations, C-suite executives, individuals, and everyone pursuing a better life, working on goal achievement, working on performance and productivity and leadership development and personal development and professional development and emotional development and spiritual development, all of the above. So the commercial is always just for me to encourage you to reach out for just a conversation, not to be sold something, but just to have a conversation. Hey, how are these principles that I share with you in this show, on this podcast, and have been sharing over the last 8 years, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads all over the world. They're reaching you. They're reaching somebody, because I see the numbers. Reach out and talk to me. Let me know how this is making an impact in your life, how this is influencing your goal achievement, your success, your quantum leaps that hopefully you are making in the direction of all you want to be doing here in your life. So today, I want to talk about that a little bit in a deeper way. One of the most powerful, I think, and sometimes uncomfortable principles of personal transformation, because, all leadership development, all kind of development starts with personal development, developing ourselves. And how does that work? Why is that? Well, why can't we just change everything outside of us? Because it doesn't work that way. Be, do, and have is always the model. And it comes down to this uncomfortable thing sometimes we talk about is responsibility. It really and truly is. And sometimes it is uncomfortable for a lot of people because they don't want to take responsibility. So responsibility, not blame, not shame, not guilt, responsibility. Because there comes a moment in every person's growth journey when they realize something life changing. And I've seen this, I notice it. The light bulb goes off, the light bulb goes on, whichever way you want to look at it. But they realize, if I do not take responsibility for my life, I consciously give power over my life. I give it away. I give it to circumstances, to conditions, and to other people for that matter. And when that realization finally lands deeply enough, everything begins to change. It did for me years and years and years ago. I mean, quantum leaps. Talk about quantum leaps. I think that's an understatement. But I've seen it with people that I've worked with too. They finally get it because they have so many of us, especially so many of us that are walking around unconscious, give power away day in and day out. I always use the analogy like better find another one, like the pinball machine bouncing around inside the pinball enclosure, right? The game enclosure bouncing from one randomly off of one bumper to another, right? And that's what we do. If we do not take responsibility for our life, we give power to circumstances, conditions, and other people, to reactions, to events that occur. So you really got to let this sink in, because that's the genesis really of change. And let's talk about that a minute, the moment that transformation begins, because I've studied over the years I love Jack Canfield and his work and the success principles and all of that. And Jack would also always say, and in fact, I think his workbooks, his success principle book starts out with, you must take, and I'm paraphrasing here, you must take 100% responsibility for your life. Now, again, when people first hear that, it can sound pretty harsh, can it? Because immediately the mind says, wait, what about what happened to me? Oh, what about unfair circumstances? They've adopted that story. Well, it was unfair. Do you know what I went through? And they're living that story over and over again. What about difficult people? You don't know who I got to deal with. What about trauma? What about bad luck? That's what the mind is doing. It's pointing to all these things. And let me say this clearly. Taking responsibility does not mean denying pain. All right. We're not glossing over it. We're not bypassing anything. It does not mean denying pain. It does not mean pretending life has always been fair. It does not mean excusing harmful behavior from others. It doesn't mean any of that. It means something much deeper. It means recognizing that your response, your mindset, your direction, your attitude, your choices, your future still belong to you. All of the above belongs to you. And the moment you reclaim that, you reclaim power. This is about taking your power back. Don't you want to be the one that has the power over your life, has control over your life and your destiny, and the quantum leaps that you're either have been making or about to make? It's, you know what? It comes down to the responsibility, because responsibility is, in fact, power. Most people that I talk to tend to think that responsibility, in the beginning anyway, responsibility feels heavy, and it can. It absolutely can. Tell me, with launching another division of our company into the weight release and the pain relief and the skin tight and all that stuff, just that healthier version of ourselves. It can feel really heavy, but actually, responsibility and being responsible for what shows up in the results that I get, responsibility is really freedom. It really is, because when I fully accept responsibility, I stop waiting. I stop waiting for someone to rescue me. Stop waiting for someone to validate me and give me that stamp, right? A stamp of approval. I stop waiting for circumstances to approve. Like, someday my ship will come. Someday this, someday that, right? I stop waiting for motivation to magically appear. Stop waiting for the perfect time to begin. And you know what? Bottom line is, I stop living reactively. Steel ball, pinball machine. I stop living reactively like that. And I begin living intentionally, consciously, aware. So within all of this, I want to touch on 3 points today. I want to focus on three things that each and every one of us must release if we truly, truly want transformation. And remember, when I'm talking about this in your personal life and in your professional life. So all has an impact and influence on leadership development, personal development, spiritual development, goal achievement, your performance, your productivity, and all that you want to bring into your field of experience in every area of your life. Remember, we talk about finance and career and time and money freedom, your mental state and educational ambitions and goals, social and cultural things that you want to achieve or transform your life around, physical and health. I'm getting bigger and bigger in that space. Spiritual and ethical, I've always been huge in that area. Family and home, of course, and our relationships, all these areas. Three things we must release if we truly want transformation. And that's what this show is all about. So hopefully you're here because you want to experience more transformation and move into the greater, grander version of yourself. So number one, giving up blaming. Number two, giving up complaining. And number three, giving up making excuses. And all of these are so easy to do. Honestly, most people, I'll tell you, and myself, and I was there for, boy, more than half my life so far. Most people, and I noticed this being in the field of personal and human potential development, most people remain stuck because they continue doing one or more of these every single day. That has become a paradigm. Remember, paradigms are a multitude of habits that have almost exclusive control over our habitual behavior. And we have habits of thoughts, habits of words, habits of actions. So these become habits. They truly do. Just push back, observe your day. Blaming, complaining, making excuses become habitual. So let's talk about giving up blame first of all, because these all rob us of what we want to experience. Blame itself is seductive because blame temporarily protects the ego. Blame says, it's their fault. I'd be successful if, or blame says, I could change if only. Blame also says, my life would improve if other people behaved differently. Right? Sound familiar? Now, again, people absolutely affect us. Life happens and absolutely impacts us. But blame, blame keeps us, I don't want to say, blame keeps us psychologically trapped in the past. It really does, because blame focuses attention on what cannot be controlled. All right? We're not in control of, that's what we're putting our attention on. And our energy flows to wherever our attention is. And growth only happens when attention returns to what can be controlled. Your attitude, your habits, your mindset, your response, your next decision. And the Jack Canfield material, I remember that Jack teaches a simple but powerful formula. I'll never forget that formula. It's always event plus response, really our response, appropriate response, event response equals outcome. So here we have an event. We respond one way or another, whatever it may be, and we experience an outcome that was born out of that. It's an equation. Event plus response equals outcome. Now, you may not control every event, but your response always influence influences the outcome. Think about that. Your response always influences the outcome. So think about that before you knee-jerk react, right? That is empowerment. That is empowerment. Breathe. Kick back for a minute right now. Hit pause. Just look at areas of your life and notice, oh yeah, I'm doing that over and over and over again. And what shows up is something I really don't want, and it's coming out of the way I reacted rather than responding appropriately or breathing through it. And it's something that we got to work on all the time. Just becoming aware of it doesn't fix it. So make this front and center in your game plan. And what about blame? Blame, again, being that energy drain, right? And this is important to know that blame. Blame is exhausting. It really is. It drains our energy. It is exhausting if you would really think about it, because the mind constantly rehearses. It stays in this circle because the mind's constantly going over again what should have happened. He should have done this. She should have done this. I should have done this, right? What should have happened? What someone else did. What was unfair? And we talk about how unfair it was. We tell everybody we can. Who disappointed us? Man, they really let us down. I can't believe it, right? The mind is constantly rehearsing that, and it is draining, it is exhausting. And all that mental energy, all that mental bandwidth becomes unavailable for creation. And isn't that why you're here? Because you want to create a new experience in your life. You want to experience transformation. You're unavailable. Excuse me. You're unavailable for healing, unavailable for growth. You cannot simultaneously build a new future while emotionally living in old resentment. At some point, we must say, yes, this happened, but I will not allow it to define the rest of my life. Now, my friends, that is power. When you do that, yeah, it happened. It's happened, but I will not allow it to define the rest of my life. All right, what else do we got to give up? We got to give up complaining. Right? You do any of that? I had somebody visit once. They got on the phone. I was tied up with something, and Renee was tied up with something. They're on the phone, and this person spent about 10 10 minutes, whoever they were talking to on the phone, 10 minutes complaining. Then they would pause. The other person would complain for 10 minutes. Then the first person would complain for another 10. And this went back and forth for over an hour. And that's all it was just complaining. And and this touches almost everybody. It really does. Because complaining, it actually becomes habitual so easily. People complain about work, they complain about traffic, they complain about politics, they complain about money, they complain about health, they complain about weather, they complain about aging, they complain about aches and pains and schedules and other people, on and on and on it goes. And what's dangerous is that complaining, it often feels productive, doesn't it? It often feels productive, like I did something. It produces nothing, absolutely nothing. Complaining creates emotional reinforcement. The more we complain, the more we emotionally condition ourselves to focus on what is wrong. And eventually, the brain begins scanning constantly for problems. It's just how we're wired. Scanning for problems, not for possibilities. Problems. We're setting ourselves up to just stay in this rut, to stay in this cycle, this negative cycle. Our brain actually begins scanning our conscious mind, our subconscious mind. Problem. Okay, bring it front and center. Now, this doesn't mean we ignore, again, doesn't mean, the disclaimer here is we don't ignore legitimate challenges, but it means we stop emotionally living inside of them, because energy flows where attention goes. I'll say that, I can't say that enough. I say it all the time. And if attention constantly goes toward frustration, well, then frustration expands. It's just how it works. And again, complaining lowers our personal power. Have you ever noticed how drained people feel after prolonged complaining? I thought they were never going to stop. They went on for 20 minutes. And what did we do? We sat there and listened to it, right? But did you ever notice how not only you, but the person that was complaining, how drained they feel? That's because this isn't healthy venting. That's because complaining lowers emotional vibration. It weakens creativity. It weakens and takes us out of a state of gratitude. We can't do both at the same time. It weakens our problem solving nature. It weakens enthusiasm. And eventually, people begin identifying with struggle itself. That becomes our story. We move energetically into it. And transformation itself requires, by the nature of what transformation is, it requires a different question. Not why is this happening to me, but what can I do now? What can I do now? That question restores power immediately. I just had that drop and I love it. And you know what? Gratitude. Gratitude interrupts complaining. Now that I think about it, it's really important here. One of the fastest ways to interrupt chronic complaining is gratitude. And it's time probably for another podcast on that because gratitude is a practice that we weave into every program we do, whether it's personal leadership development, personal productivity, strategic leadership development, motivational leadership development, goal achievement programs, thinking into results, spiritual development programs. Man, gratitude has to be the starting point every day to everything. And this is the way. This is the key to interrupting chronic complaining because gratitude shifts focus from scarcity to possibility. And gratitude's not denial. It is perspective. It says, yes, challenges exist, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful to recognize that so do opportunities. So does growth. So does possibility. So does my infinite potential. And I am grateful for it. And people who consistently grow in life usually develop this ability. It's so important. They refuse to let temporary problems dominate their entire consciousness. All right. And with that in mind, let's talk about giving up excuses. Starting to wind down here, but this is so important. I want to talk about excuses for just a couple of minutes here because excuses are particularly dangerous because they sound reasonable, right? Don't we make them sound reasonable? And and often they are reasonable, right? But they're still excuses. We got to recognize them for what they are. I'm too busy. Sounds reasonable. They're not too busy. They couldn't get to it. I'm overwhelmed. I got so much on my plate. And it's an excuse. I'm too old. Too old. People say that about, starting another division. It's going to take a lot of time and energy and resources and money, right? Not too old. I'm ageless. Another excuse. I don't have enough money. I'll start later. I just need more time. And again, some of those circumstances may be real, right? It sounds reasonable, could be real. But the question becomes, are they explanations or are they limitations we have chosen to permanently believe? Remember, I talk a lot about beliefs. What do you believe in? Examining your beliefs on a regular basis. Are they limitations we have chosen to permanently believe? Because that's what happens to them when we rehearse them over and over again. They become that thought that turns into a belief. And you have to recognize too that there's going to be obstacles and successful people are not people without obstacles, okay? They're people who stop negotiating with excuses, right? Comes right down to it. Our excuses create stagnation. We become stagnant. Nothing happens. Nothing grows out of that. Every excuse postpones possibility. Every excuse delays action. Every excuse reinforces a smaller identity. We really shrink down. We're giving away our power through all of this. We're shrinking the smaller identity. We're not standing in our power. And over time, people begin unconsciously building lives around reasons instead of results. Now, let me say something important here. Taking responsibility does not mean becoming perfect overnight. It means becoming honest. Honest about where you are, honest about your habits, honest about your patterns, honest about your choices. Because honesty creates clarity. And we have to have that clarity. We have to crystallize our thinking. And clarity then creates change. We have to decide, and there's power in deciding. At some point, transformation truly becomes a decision that says, I will no longer live as a victim of circumstance. I will no longer hand away my power through blame. I will no longer rehearse limitation. I will no longer build my identity around excuses. And when we do this, that moment changes everything. Because the moment responsibility increases, personal power increases. Watch it. Prove it happen in your own life. Just prove it. Personal responsibility. Let's touch on this because I'm all about spiritual integration. So what about this personal responsibility and that aspect of our lives, spiritual growth when it comes to spiritual growth? Now, spiritually, this matters so deeply. It really does because growth requires conscious participation, right? I think if you're listening and you're still listening now, you know that growth requires conscious participation, not unconscious reaction. We're not passive observers in our lives. Don't allow yourself to become that passive observer. We are co-creators. Thought matters. Focus matters. Speech matters. Choices matter. Habits matter. And while we may not control everything externally, we absolutely influence what develops internally. And eventually, the inner life, well, you've been listening to me, you know it shapes the outer life. So why is this important? Because you need to know your future is not fixed, right? Your destiny is not fixed. You're not predestined to some point. One of the most empowering truths in personal development is this: your future is not fixed. You are shaping it every single day through decisions, focus, actions, reactions, beliefs, and habits. The future is not merely something that happens to you. It is something you participate in creating. Consistent daily efforts, the energy of your dream, your desire, your aspiration, your goals embodied, moving into them energetically, adjusting your frequency to match what it is you want to move into your field of experience by living it out in your vision. So here's a simple challenge for you today, because you know I'm all about application and action. Spend 1 week, just 1 week till the next show comes out. 1 week observing blame where you're blaming in your life. 1 week just observing complaints, the observer. 1 week examining the excuses you make. Not judging yourself here, okay? This isn't about shaming and beating yourself up and being your own worst critic. We can often do that very easily. It's probably one of our habits. But this isn't about judging yourself. This is just about noticing. Notice what you're noticing. Notice. How often do all these appear? Blame, complaints, excuses. How often do they shape your thinking? They set you up for the energy of your day. How often? And then when we observe them, when we notice them, we can gently interrupt them. We can replace blame with responsibility. We can replace complaining with gratitude. And we can replace excuses with action, even small action, even just a little bit of action. Because small action is the beginning point of restoring momentum, and momentum changes lives. So I remember Jack Canfield once said, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. All right. It's been said a few times by a few people, but that's so true. Keep doing what you're doing. You're going to keep getting what you've always gotten in life. And why that may sound simple, it is profoundly true. Transformation begins the moment we stop waiting for life to change and we begin changing ourselves. Not perfectly, but intentionally, responsibly, consciously. Because responsibility is not punishment. Responsibility is power. And perhaps the most liberating realization of all of this is the moment you stop giving your power away, your life begins. That moment, you don't have to wait for this. The moment you stop giving your power away, your life begins to move in a completely different direction. You want something that can make an influence in your results and what's showing up in your outcomes and really have an impact on your goal achievement. Listen to this and apply it in your life. Your life will begin to move in a completely different direction. So that's going to do it for today. When over, as always, reach out to me. Successappointment.com is my calendar. Successappointment.com. We can talk about any of this. We can talk about where you're stuck and we can help you identify that. That's what I do and do best is help you see the blind spots so that you can work out a plan to overcome them. So let's have a conversation about doing this for yourself individually, you as a small business owner, an entrepreneur, solopreneur, for your team and your work environment and your corporation and your company, in your on your executive team, your C-suite executives, whatever it may be, whether you're a Fortune 50 company or you're the mom and pop store on the corner, doesn't matter. You are all part of what makes this world go around. And I love working with each and every one of you. And don't forget to reach out to me, especially if you're local to Northwest Florida and you need to maybe accomplish something in the physical and health arena as well with letting go of some excess poundage. I've gained 60 pounds over the last 6 months. So reach out. We can talk about that too. Let's just have a conversation. Successappointment.com. You've been listening to the Genesis Frequency Podcast with me, yours truly, Dr. Cause and Effect. This is Dr. Stephen J. Kosmyna. I'll see you next time, and I wish for you an infinitely spectacular day. God bless you.